We are a holistic, diverse ministry for the entire family, grounded in love in order to save the lost, disciple believers, build strong families, and be change agents for Christ in the community. We call ourselves life changers because when you connect with us, our core values of the welcome, the worship, the word, and the witness will change your life forever. Need a change? The new life experience is simply life changing.
Let's lean into Lent. And are you ready to lean into Lent? Hey, welcome to eChurch. Welcome to eChurch. I know what you've been saying. You said, Bishop, where in the world have you been? Look like we've heard everybody for in the new year in the eChurch, but you. I'm here, baby, and I got a word for you. You already know it's going to be a series that I'm kicking off myself that leads us up to Resurrection Sunday. And we're going to ask you to lean into Lent. But before we do that, I just want to run across a couple things that we always do. Welcome to eChurch. We wish you were here, but we're glad you're there. And I really need you to grab a hold of the fact that this is the time in which we are getting ready for Resurrection Sunday, and it's already getting started. And I want you to do a couple things. Remember, if you are a life changer, if you've not done your first fruit yet, remember it's not too late. Get ready to sacrifice, to move forward to giving your first fruit on Resurrection Sunday. Now, they're going to put the ways that you can give already on the screen, the various things that you can do, how you need to do it. You already know how to do it. But if you're not a life changer and you can see the various ways from our Cash App to our church app, however you want to do it, if you want to go to our website, we would love to receive your seed, but your tithe belongs to your local church. We thank God that you are watching right now. And if you are a life changer and you're watching right now, you already know it's tithes and offerings time. You want to go ahead and give it right now before we get into the word tonight. Well, it's good to be back. I'm here with you because I have a word for you on this month. What are we going to do? Go ahead. Lean into Lent. You're going to lean into Lent. And this is what I need you to do before I begin to share the word. Come on now. You already know the couple things that I need you to do. You need to engage with me during eChurch. I want to see you engage. What do I mean by engage? I need to see something in the chat area. When you get the revelation, put it in the chat area so other people can get it. That they can get it as we circulate this particular eChurch throughout social media. Put it in the chat area. You get a revelation. Put that in the chat area. You can also, we need you to do what you already know. Hey, share. You got to share. Got to share it so other people can get what you got. And then thirdly, do a watch party. Do a watch party. And you already know that I'm going to have a word for you this coming Sunday. I don't want to preempt myself, but you are here right now for the word of eChurch, leaning in to Lent. Well, look, let's talk about Lent. Let's talk about Lent before we get to it. And while we are talking about it, you can turn to Romans 12, 1 through 4. You can turn to Romans 12, 1 through 4. We'll flash it on the screen when we get ready to read it. But I want you to grab a hold of something. I need to teach a little bit about Lent. Now, in January, we come out of consecration period. Well, in February or so, we move into a period that is 6 weeks prior to Resurrection Sunday. This period is traditionally called Lent. So we can get into it. And you know it, you see it on television, and you say, now, Bishop, am I supposed to go around and Ash Wednesday? We're a little late for this. Well, we're only taking these 5 weeks out of March because we come out of a whole month of consecration in January. We take a little bit of a break, and now it's ready, as Jesus said, to turn our face toward Jerusalem. As he is going to Jerusalem, so will we. So, do you want me to go get some ashes and put on my forehead? No. Let's talk about what Lent is. Lent is a season in the life of the church, in the kingdom, that was put in place soon after Christ was ascended into heaven. The believers at that time, several years, almost a generation within the time that Christ went back to heaven, began to celebrate resurrection, commonly called Easter. We like to call it, from the believer's point of view, Resurrection Sunday. And they picked these 40 days, 6 weeks leading up to Resurrection Sunday, because 40 days is very significant. Hang in there. Now we're going to get to the word, but I need to tell you what it is before you can then learn how to use it. You know what it meant before you can know what it means. So 40 days leading up to that. Number 40, there's various reasons. All of them point to biblical reasons why we pick 40. You already know 40. Jesus was in the wilderness how long? 40 days. Elijah fasted how long? 40 days. Moses did what? 40 days. The children of Israel, where were they? In the wilderness? 40 years. You already know that 40 is a significant number of generational testing from one generation to the next. 40 is a significant number, and therefore we have this association with 6 weeks from Easter to the number 40. And during that period, we call it Lent. Lent has to do with, of course, a time of abstinence, penitence, commemoration of Christ, his suffering, fasting, and prayer. It is that period in which believers set aside and say, we've got to turn our face. It's like this. Hang in there, because I still got to walk off a few things for you before we get into the word, okay? As we lean into Lent, I want you to grab a hold of the fact that during that period, as believers, we want to begin in many ways to walk with Christ, to deal with what Christ dealt with as we get close to his death and his resurrection. Can't celebrate resurrection unless we deal with some stuff. And during this time of penitence, and during this time of abstinence, during this time of refusing ourselves some things like food, sweets, meat, coffee, television, social media, we want our behavior to change, to grow. Now, doesn't everyone want to grow in God? Come on, put that, I want to grow. Well, Lent is a time in which you are going to grow in God. You're going to grow in grace. You're not going to just grow in knowledge. Man, everybody got a lot of knowledge, but I'm going to grow in the changing of my behavior, because I'm going to change some things in my life during this time of Lent. Now, when we do this, we say, I'm going to put some things aside. I'm going to turn my face toward Jerusalem. I'm going to walk as Christ walked, and I'm going to deal with these kinds of things because I want to grow. As we do what? Lean into Lent. Now, here's some things that should happen during this time of Lent. Hang in there. I want you to grab this now. Increasing frequency and fervency of prayer. Write that down. It's going to show it on the screen. Growing desires to connect with Jesus. Growing desire to connect with Jesus. Deepening dissatisfaction with what the world has to offer. Expanding habits of generosity. Surging distaste with sins that normally go ignored. You know, the things that we say, well, you know what, that's okay. No, it's not. No, it's not. That you're going to say, you know what, I'm severing that. I'm severing that. A swelling of my faith that relies on God instead of my own self-medication of food and people and all kinds of things. My all factor. Pause, story, I'll come back. Do you not know that there is one nerve that dips down into all the way into your stomach, into your intestine? That nerve is the nerve that carries with it the traumatic things that happen, the traumatic things that happen in your life wrote on that nerve. That's why you get nervous in your stomach. And that's why I'm going somewhere with this, when you try to feed your fears. Yeah. Come on, red stew, Esau. I want some stew more than I want anything else. Because there's some things that go on the inside of us. Well, during Lent, as you lean into Lent, you want to grab a hold of and start controlling that and knowing that, hey, I'm not going to deal with any kind of PTSD stuff of some traumas that I've dealt with that causes me to get that uneasy. Because when I get the uneasy, I'm going to feed it more of God because I'm doing what? Leaning into Lent. Hungering deeply for the things of God and escalating your courage to face the hostile world against the things of Christ. Those are some of the things that we do with Lent, but I want you to grab a hold of the fact that in this series that we're going to cover, this series that we're going to do in this month, I want you cannot miss. Now, don't miss a Wednesday now, because here are the things that we're going to cover. Today, we're going to deal with sacrifice. Yeah, that's a 4-letter word with folk. Sacrifice. But do you want to grow in God? Yes, you want to grow in God. So you got to learn about sacrifice. Second thing that you're going to learn about in this time that we lean into Lent is service. You were saved to serve. So you're going to learn some more about serving those that need to be served. Third thing that we're going to cover in our series is this: sin. Wow. Did you say the 3-letter? Yes, I did. And we don't deal with it enough in the church, but we're going to deal with how. 1 John 1:9 says, confess your faults, confess your sins to one another. And he is faithful and just to forgive us and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. If anybody says that they have not sinned, then the truth is not in them. For we all have sinned and do what? Fallen short. So we're going to deal with that whole sin. How do I deal with sin? How am I going to defeat the sin that always so easily comes up and knocks me back? We're going to deal with that. How many of you want to be victorious in that? So sacrifice, service, sin, sowing. What am I sowing and what am I reaping? And then finally, suffering, because we'll be close to Resurrection Sunday at that time. Are you ready to go? You ready to get into it? Hey, well, let's get into it. Let's get into the Word. And now that we've kind of given you the overview, let's deal with this. Let's turn to Romans 12, 1-4, and let's see what it has to say here. Romans 12, 1-4 says this: therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good will, his pleasing and perfect will. Here's what Paul is saying. Paul is saying this in this scripture that was repeatedly spoken to me when I gave my life to Christ in the church, United Holy Church of America, Pentecostal Holiness Church, where it was a sin to breathe. I'm kidding. No, don't be offended. Don't be offended now. But you know what I mean. And in the Pentecostal holiness tradition, I mean, you can't do nothing. I mean, nothing. Well, this was always, whenever some grown-up wanted to stop a young person from doing something, they said, don't be of the world. You are a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable. So they used that to make sure that girls didn't wear pants and red lipstick and guys didn't play sports, and whatever they felt like they wanted to beat you across the head with, they'd go to Romans 12:1. I can wake up in the middle of the night, quoted. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. You ought not look like the world. Paul ain't even talking about that, y'all. Paul's not talking about that. He's not talking about whether you are living like the world. Paul's mind goes back to the sacrifices that in the Old Testament and even into the New Testament until Christ dies. He goes back to turtle doves. He goes back to lambs and rams. He's going back to the animal sacrifices on the altar that were sacrificed so that they may sprinkle the blood over for atonement for sin. Paul is saying we don't do that anymore because there was one sacrifice, and that sacrifice was sufficient and adequate for all of us. That was the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross. He shed his blood once for all. So Paul is saying, you're not a dead sacrifice, you're a living sacrifice. And there's some things that you have to understand with respect to being a sacrifice. Here are the three things that I want to share with you that Paul is saying. In order to be a sacrifice, remember, when we're talking about leaning into Lent, I'm talking about letting go some stuff. I'm talking about now that I understand that I am human. I'm not a superhero. That's part of what Lent reminds us of, that we are cloaked in this flesh. And that if we don't do some things, we will be succumbed or conformed to the world. And therefore, he's saying one of the things you got to understand is sacrifice. Let go some things. And that means that you have to surrender. Can you say that word surrender? Can you put that word in the chat area? Surrender. S-U-R-R-E-N-D-E-R. Surrender. Can you surrender some things? What is it? As a living sacrifice, Paul says, not a dead sacrifice, but a living sacrifice surrenders some things. Now, why is it important that we use that word surrender? Because surrender has to do with volition. Out of my own volition, I determine to surrender. It's not come and coerced out of me. My arm is not put behind my back. That's not what he does. No, That's not how our walk with leaning into Lent, that I might grow in him. I willingly say, I'm going to surrender some things. Some stuff that's been attached to me that's just, I can't get it. I'm going to surrender some things. I'm going to surrender the way I talk. My talk is off. I know it's off. So I'm going to surrender because I be trying to make a point, but I can't make it the way I want. So I say things I really shouldn't say in the way I shouldn't say it. I'm going to surrender. I'm going to give that up. I'm going to give it up. Paul is saying, as a living sacrifice, you have the free will, and we're going to get into will right there in that fourth verse. You have the free will to surrender. Surrender. The second thing is that you have to understand, is that you have to decide that you're going to seize the opportunity. You got to seize the opportunity. Paul is saying, as a living sacrifice, believers understand something, is that now you have to seize the opportunity to reflect who Christ is in the earth. The only way that you can seize the opportunity is that you cannot be conformed. What does that mean? Let's break that down even further. It talks about the systems of the world. We tend to think about things, and morality is good. There's nothing wrong with us raising these issues of morality. But greater than that, we miss in this text is Paul is saying, when you talk about being ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, don't be conformed to the world. He is saying to world systems, the way the world will do it, the systems of the world. Systems have to do with the root and the routine of things, how things are laid out. And you have to determine that I'm not going to do things that way. And not only that, I'm going to know also that my walk with God, if I line up with his system, if I line up with his system of giving, if I line up with his system of living, if I line up with his system of thinking, then I will be successful. I'll be successful. I don't have to worry about trying to be a superhero because he's already given me a cape that comes from him. So I have to understand that I have to surrender. I have to understand that I have to seize the opportunity of the moment to be what God has called me to be. And then the third thing is this. I have to understand that there is going to be, here we go, a little bit of suffering. Now, we're going to get into it even further later, but a lot of times we miss this whole thing in understanding that when I decide that I'm going to live for the Lord, there's going to be some suffering to this. I'm going to have some long suffering with this. And let's read back through this again as we come to the point that I need you to. Therefore, the NIV translation, therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not be conformed to this world or the pattern of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will, so that I might be able to understand that when I take on the will of God sometimes requires a little bit of suffering, a little bit of going through. Not a little bit, sometimes a lot of bit. And we live in a culture now that does not want to deal with that. But in order for you to get to the perfect will of God, sometimes there's going to be a little bit of suffering, a lot of bit of suffering. And Paul lifts this up. And Paul says that now remember this. Remember that you are a living sacrifice in doing it. So I want to challenge you right now. I want to challenge you. During this time of Lent, as we lean into Lent, as we get ready for Christ's crucifixion, for Christ's resurrection, for the core of what we believe, because this is fundamental. This makes us different than anybody else. This is the fundamentals of our faith. As we prepare, as we lean into it, as we move forward to it, because we can't show up on Resurrection Sunday morning and celebrate without going through some stuff before we get to ask Christ is. As we get ready to get into his will, know, what are you going to drop off? What are you going to decide to do? What are you going to sacrifice from? What are you going to let go of in the next, not 6 weeks, because we're already into it, but for the next 4.5, 5 weeks? What are you going to let go? Let me just click off a couple things for you. Let's double click on social media. How about that? You want to double click on that? You want to say, hey, for the next 4.5 weeks, 5 weeks, no social media. What about this? What about this? The favorite drama that you love so much and you know it has all kinds of things in it that not that good for your walk in God. How about double clicking on that? What about that relationship that's not of God? How about double clicking on that? How about this? How about maybe you want to fast from some things food-wise? I don't know. You love sweets? How about cutting back on it? I guarantee you, if you cut back, if you say, I'm double clicking on that, no more of that, that sacrifice, that suffering, that surrender will render you into a powerful place in Christ as we lean into Lent. I just wanted to give an overview now. We're going to drill deeper each week. Come on and go with me. Each week is going to get better and better. But don't come by yourself. Ask somebody else to watch with you. The Lord be with you. May His face shine upon you, give you peace. I want to give you the opportunity to connect with us. All you have to do, if you want to connect with New Life, be a part of our online campus or a part of our congregation right here in O'Fallon, Illinois, on the east side of the Mississippi, on the east side, just across the river from St. Louis. All you have to do is text the word decision to 71441. Text the word decision to 71441. I'll see you this Sunday at 9:30 with our New Life worship experience. We call it Virtual New Life at 9:30 Central Standard Time. I got a word for you. God bless you. Bye now.
Life Changers, before you close eChurch, don't forget to give your tithes, offering, and generosity matching. There are multiple ways to give. May God bless you, and thank you for being a part of eChurch. IDEX Media does a lot. From IDEX Photography to IDEX Films. We help create forever memories and forever impressions. Image a nation, image a world. IDEX Media.